what do I have to do to keep my team on the field and in the game to just stay in it for longer? Because I really believe that we are set up with our products and processes and all those kinds of things to win in the long run. I just need to stay in the game.
Welcome to the Winning E-commerce Experience Show, where it's all about creating a brand that your customers love so they keep coming back. This show is brought to you by DataQ. Your store experience begins with your homepage. DataQ improves your conversion rate up to 30% by showing each visitor a personalized homepage based on their interest. And now, your host, Shahram Anver.
Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Winning Customer Experience Show. Today, we have a special guest. He's the CEO of 4x400. He actually wears two hats. So he's an e-commerce holding company that acquires and grows e-commerce, and he also runs his own brand. Ladies and gentlemen, Andrew Faris.
Hey, Shahram. Thanks, man.
Hey, so it's good to have you, man. We had a really good sort of introductory talk just now, and it seems like things are going pretty crazy. What's it like over there, with your company, and how are you thinking about navigating this new pandemic crisis?
It is crazy. It is crazy. Yeah. So a little bit about 4x400 that might help kind of bring some clarity. And just to clarify, so I don't run my own brand separate from 4x400. We own and operate three brands, and are constantly looking to acquire and grow more brands from there. So just for context, our brands are all e-commerce direct to consumer brands. They're all in the range of $2 or $3 million in revenue. This year they'll be all 3 to 5, I think, probably. So just to give you a sense of the size of things that we're dealing with. So Slick Products makes wash products for off-road vehicles. And so anything going to get really dirty or muddy or bloody is going to, we have products specifically for cleaning those. Bamboo Earth, Bamboo with a U, makes really super clean skincare products in terms of ingredients clean. And then FC Goods makes wallets out of vintage baseball gloves and other leather accessories. So really broad range of products. And that has really formed my experience at 4x400. Our team's about a dozen people, and as we operate those brands, I mean, the effect of this whole thing on each of the three brands is just totally different. So, on the one hand, we've got, wallets made out of vintage baseball gloves is a total non-essential. Our average order value is like over $140. It's sort of a luxury good. It's a gift product. It's exactly the kind of thing that if you don't like that right now, you would maybe hesitate to buy for yourself because, it's far from an essential. People are still, I think, riding off-road vehicles. So that business has kind of been a little bit more in the middle in terms of how the effect has gone for how consumers are spending on that product for Slick. But that has been really affected by supply chain issues. So we've had to sort that side out. And then that's really the only one of our brands so far where the supply chain is breaking. We think we have that fixed. We'll see in a few weeks here. And then on the other hand, there's companies selling skincare products, which I don't know if you'd call it an essential or not, but for a lot of people, it really matters as a health and taking care of your skin. It's not just about how you look; it's about self-care and take care of things. So we've seen actually some positives in the business related to all this. I'm so hesitant to even put it in those terms, but the point is just that like across those three brands in very different spaces. It's just so completely different what we're seeing for each one. So yeah, man, it's been just crazy as we try to sort of navigate all of that and pull all the right levers to figure out how to handle it. No matter from the top level perspective or getting into the details of each one, you can really see kind of what these effects have been. And I'll just say I'm pretty much by nature an optimist. So, you should probably take this with a little grain of salt, but I really do believe though that there's great opportunity in this for brands to be really smart and serve their customers really uniquely and really well. So even where we've seen big hits, I think this is there's plenty of reason to also feel like it's, aside from everything else that's happening in the world, there's plenty of reasons to feel like we can kind of get through this.
So you're actually in a very interesting position because I suppose you could say that you've really got your risks sort of really diversified here. because you've got three very different types of businesses, and they're all, like you said, falling into like different segments of how it's been affected by this coronavirus thing. But at the same time, you're also dealing with completely different issues as well. So how are you even prioritizing what you need to focus on?
You're completely right. So this is one thing that I have that's really different than what a lot of operators are dealing with right now, is that like, because we have three brands, we can really approach each brand. We can approach the total portfolio really differently, where we can look and say like, where do we want to put like resources?
Yes.
And even just the way we're structured, each brand has a brand manager who's like sort of uniquely responsible. As it turns out, as the CEO, I'm also sort of the interim brand manager for FC Goods, the wallets and
Right. The
leather goods
baseball.
company.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so I don't have as much personal incentive tied to that brand, which makes it a little bit easier for me to kind of help sort of sort out where we should be putting our resources, because what we're basically doing is saying like, if that one is the one where the effects of this are most direct on how people are shopping, why don't we just divert shared resources away from that business and towards our other ones? And while I think that is unique for my situation where I have these three brands to work with,
Hmm.
um, what I think is not unique is that that same effect will happen at the product level for a lot of different people. As long as, I mean, I think it's gonna be a little harder for somebody like you, Shram, where it's like a tech company and there's like a, if I understand correctly, and if there's
Yeah.
there's an element where there's kind of um, one, maybe a little more focused on a single product, but maybe there's actually a different set of customers you could move towards or something in a way
Exactly.
that are
Exactly.
affected really differently, right? Yeah. So
Yeah.
you have the same calculation for everybody, which is sort of like, okay, where is this thing affecting my business particularly negatively, and are there any places where maybe actually there's unique upside in this moment uh, for our businesses? I think it's a lot less true for people who are operating storefronts and that sort of thing, where
Hmm.
it's just really, really challenging right now. But for people whose businesses, pretty much completely exist online, um, yeah, there are ways to kind of think about this, I think, that are a little different and potentially create some opportunities. So that's what we're doing. We're just kind of looking, and I'll just tell you, like we're just diverting as much resources possible to Bamboo Earth right now, while we try to fix the supply chain for Slick and for
Right.
FC Goods. We're playing around in the background to see what we can come up with, but we're less optimistic about it and more hopeful about that as a longer term play.
Right. I mean, I guess it comes down to that. I mean, you always have this tension between, when you're running a business, to think short term versus long term. I mean, you got to pay your bills, but at the same time, you want to make sure you're setting yourself up for growth, right? And I think, like with this pandemic, it's kind of really throwing that off, because we were just talking about it now. Like, I don't think anybody has a very clear idea how long this situation is going to last and what it's going to look like at the end. So, how are you approaching it in that point of view? Like, are you just thinking, okay, like forget long term, let's just try to figure things out for like right now and try to be nimble? Or are you still thinking like, okay, like in terms of long term, I'm going to try to make some predictions and I'm going to go with that? Like, how are you approaching this?
Yeah. So my baseline approach to this is to start from the premise that nobody knows the future. And I don't mean
That
that
makes
to throw
sense.
my hands up in the air at your question. What
Yeah.
I mean is like, if that's the thing that's true, if nobody can predict the future, then I have to start thinking about what's the range of potential outcomes, and then prepare myself accordingly and try to project what those possibilities are as probabilistically as possible.
Right.
Now I'm not doing any intense modeling for that or anything like that, although we're starting to consider actually really starting to play that out with some modeling. But I'm not deep enough as a stat like analytics statistics guy to be able to do a great job with that. So instead, I'm just kind of starting from that
You can do like a
position
back
and
of the
saying,
napkin kind of modeling, right? That I think that
correct.
should be
And
pretty good. Yeah.
yeah, and and I'm not really trying to get that detailed anyway. So what I think is like, if I can start with that premise that I don't know what's going to happen, except there's one thing I'm pretty confident in, which is that the global base of consumers in the next bunch of years is going to do what it did in the last bunch of years, which is grow, as the world continues to develop in all kinds of places, as um, you know
Mm.
hundreds of millions of people experience um, global consumer society
Yeah.
essentially, and they are raised out of abject poverty and into the rest of the global like economy.
Yeah.
I think you can look back in the last bunch of years, if you want to go look at that. Sometimes go read Hans Rosling's book Factfulness,
I
and
love his
go
TED
kind of
talks.
watch that.
So
What's that?
I love his TED talks. Like brilliant.
He is he is so good. Some of that thinking I think is helpful because basically what it puts baseline is that the most likely thing in the very long run is that the world economic system will continue to grow. And if something cataclysmic happens in the that's going to stop that from happening, like my business is going to die anyway, and there's nothing I can do about it, so it's not even worth being afraid of. Like it's like, you know what I mean? Like what can I do
Right,
about that? So
right.
um, so for me, it is about like how essentially what all of that does and creates for me very practically is it says to me, what do I have to do to keep my team on the field and in the game to just stay in it for longer? Because I really
Hmm.
believe that we are set up with our products and processes and all those kinds of things to win in the long run. I just need to stay. I just need to stay in the game. And I look, I I just told you where our revenue's at. Like we're trying to grow fast. We're spending a lot of money on ads. We raised a little bit of money early on, but not a ton. We are not sitting on some big treasure chest of cash. Like, so we have to be pretty careful guarding our cash as a business. Really think about capitalization and liquidity in order to get to where we need to go. But that's
Yeah.
what we're thinking about. So how do I respond to what's happening today? Absolutely. I'm like trying to make the most of the moment. There's some metrics I'm looking at really specifically. And at the same time, like from my perspective, it's about staying in the game because I really liked our projections before all this for the year. You know, I think we're going to be in a
As
good
did I
place.
think a lot of
So
people listening.
yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that answers your question very specifically,
No,
but
no,
there
but
you go.
I think that makes sense. I think it's very pragmatic because I think you mentioned at the start, when we started talking, that trying to predict stuff is like a fool's errand. It makes me think of like one of the books I quite like is this one by Stephen Covey, The Seven Habits of Highly Effectual People, I think, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And he has this theory which I really like, and I try to apply it in my own life too. He talks about like these circles of influence. So he says like, you've got this one circle which are things you can directly act on, and then you draw another circle just outside it, which are things you can influence, and then you've got this last circle, which are basically things you can neither change or influence, like you have no control over. And he says that like people who tend to panic and overreact or worry too much spend like 80% of the time on the last circle and don't think about everything else. And the ones who actually manage to stay calm do what, kind of what you just said. Like, if I can't control it or influence it, well, forget it. If I'm going to go out of business, well, that's not really up to me. But hey, here are the things that I can control, and here are the things I'm going to actually do right now.
Yeah, I think that's basically right. Like, yeah, that's a really helpful kind of framework for thinking about it. It's a little bit like that. I was thinking it's like a little bit like what you hear in recovery with the serenity prayer. Something grant me the serenity to accept the things I can't change to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. You know, like
Yeah.
there's some real wisdom there around just the idea of like um, around the idea of like I can spend all my time worrying, and like I also don't want to downplay people's emotions. Like people are going to worry and have anxiety. Like
Yes.
I
Yes.
told my wife yesterday, hey, can you watch our son for a little bit while I just go for a drive? And I just drove around for an hour just to like kind of clear my head, and it really helped.
Oh man. Okay.
So yeah, so there's like plenty of that kind of stuff, and I don't want to like take away people's permission to have negative emotions about this, but it's just a real thing that like once I get back in the saddle and to my day to day, there's just a question of like what can I affect and where, how can I do good analysis on my business to see where the levers are and the inflection points are that I can do the best that I can. And if something happens outside of my control that makes it so that no matter what levers I pull, it doesn't work,
Sure. Sure. I mean,
then that happens if that's out of my control.
you could probably extend that analogy to what you just did as well, right? Like, I mean, it's perfectly reasonable to be worried, and then you sort of took a very proactive action there, where you said, you know what, I kind of need a timeout, and I'm going to go drive. I mean, I'd say that that's a very proactive way of dealing with it. So hopefully, someone listening in, I mean, it doesn't mean that you have to be sort of debilitated by the worry. Like, if you need a timeout, go take it.
Saying to you before we start talking here that happens to be a good time for that sort of thing in LA where I am. The sky is particularly clear because nobody's on the road polluting it. So because nobody's going to work. So it's like one of the only times ever you could go drive around LA and have it be like relaxing and not and
Yeah,
not just a source of more anxiety. So
it is just absolutely crazy. It's like you're kind of in this dystopian movie. I mean, I was on the train the other day, and it was just like, a train which has so many people on it. Usually on a Monday afternoon, there's just no one. It felt like, yeah, it was really eerie. It was weird.
bizarre right now, no question.
So, okay, I mean, I think that's a very good framework to, try to sort of think about how to react. But I think, just coming back to that original question, people listening in are going to fall into one of these three buckets, right? So you're going to have some people who've got maybe, say, the luxury kind of stuff like FC goods, where maybe you're not going to see uh, a lot of demand right now. Maybe no one's going to buy anything. Or then you might have sort of the essentials, and then you might have people somewhere in between, like the skincare that you talked about. So maybe let's like dive into each of these separately. Um, I mean, I guess it's kind of hard for you to really get into because you obviously have a more portfolio approach. But let's say like we take the hardest one, right? So you're doing sort of the luxury goods, and maybe you were projecting really good revenue in the last week. It's just gone to zero. What would you sort of say to somebody in that situation? Like, what would you like? How would you, if you were in their shoes, like how would you try to approach that?
Yeah, so it hasn't gone to zero, which is good. But
That's good.
I'll tell you the exact effect, and this is like the first thing for me is like analysis first. This is another thing that Hans Rosling's really great on. Actually, is just like before you act, like really try to understand the problem. And it's like this is a big thing for me in business and particularly in e-commerce. Like there's only three factors in your revenue. That's it. There's only three. One of them
Yeah.
is how many people get to your website. The second one is how many of them convert, and the third one is how much they spend when they do.
Hmm.
Visitors, conversion rate, average order value. That's it. That's the whole ball game.
Yeah.
So if you can start by isolating the problem, you can go a long way. And um, for for FC goods, the problem is conversion rate. People are not buying. Like the other little metric that is great for this is before all of this, about 30% of the people who made it to my checkout purchased. That number is actually really low relative to industry standard, but it's because of the way we get them there. We kind of rush people to check out. So,
Right.
I expect that, and I'm fine with that. It sort of nets out in the end. So, 30% of people get to my checkout purchase. Um, like since all of this, that number is now down like to 10% or less, right? So what that clearly says to me, with no changes in the process of getting them there, what that clearly tells me is like people are just gripping their cash tighter. But that
Mm.
also means I can isolate exactly where the problem is, which is that people are buying less. Now, and the other effect of that is that this is happening for lots and lots of businesses right now, which means on the large ad networks like Google and Facebook, um, that means that there is less competition for traffic. And the chain of effects here is really simple, right?
Sure.
Less conversion rate means that traffic is less valuable to advertisers, which means advertisers are gonna spend less to acquire that traffic, which means that the cost for advertising for everybody goes down because these systems are giant auctions. And if less people show up and they all have less money to spend, the price of all the items at the auction goes down. So if that makes sense. So what that means is we are seeing traffic costs go way down, like to the tune of 30 some odd percent overnight. It's
Wow.
30% cheaper to pay for traffic than it was a couple weeks ago. So if your business is not affected by like at the conversion rate level by coronavirus, like you are just raking in cash right now because all of a sudden it is so much cheaper to acquire traffic than it was before. But so for me, for FC Goods, what I'm looking at is that moment of conversion and saying like, okay, what can I do to affect that and make this
Mm.
really worth somebody's time right now? That's
Mm.
the problem to solve. The problem to solve is not revenue in broad terms. The problem to solve is not a million other things. And like, liquidity might be the problem to solve, right? You might need to like go out of your way and go solve a cash problem for your business. But for me, it's really specific. It's how do I take that traffic that is still getting to checkout? In fact, I'm paying much less to get them to checkout than usual. Um, how do I take that traffic and what do I put in front of them to make it really worth their time to convert right now? Not to convert, but to convert right now in this moment where it's tricky. And there's a lot of stuff you could do, right? So if um, I'm really sort of allergic to reactionary discount strategies as a
Right.
general rule. I think it tends to be pretty lazy marketing,
Sure.
and you end up getting a worse customer in the long term. But in this moment, I think all those rules are out the window. I think like if you're not a brand that discounts, you could still get away with a discount right now and maintain your premiumness because the world is really different than it was 2 weeks ago. And I think when this ends, you could come back to being full price all the time and not really have any brand equity hit. That's my theory. It's hard to bear that out. So that's one thing you could do. You could discount. You could change the product offer. You could think about spreading out payments with all kinds of different, the software with like Afterpay and Affirm. people might be familiar with. It can maybe help people spread their payments out. And we're exploring all of those different options, and maybe even, give backs or something that's just going to make people feel better about spending their money on, and do a little bit of good along the way. So there's a million things, but that's the problem. The problem is conversion rate. And so I'm starting there, isolating that. That's what I'd say to somebody is like, your business is different than mine. Maybe there's less people showing up now than there were before for all kinds of reasons, right? Because
Then just focus on
I don't
that,
know.
right?
Right. But that's the problem. So that's the problem you have to solve. How do I get in front of more people? So yeah, focus on that one thing, isolate the problem, go from there.
Boom. And I think we just got another nice framework out of this conversation. So first, identify the problem that you have to
Yeah.
solve. I mean, I think that's just, I think it's just worth reminding, because it again goes back to that philosophy of like, when you're in a panic, you just want to act, when what you really should be doing, like you said, is take a deep breath and just think like, okay, hang on, where really is the problem? Right?
Doctor saw a sick person and was like, well, the problem is they're sick. Like, well, yeah, but that doesn't actually help anything, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's not what you try and do. The whole point is like, you isolate where the problem is, and then you go try and attack that specific issue with as few negative effects on the rest of the thing as possible. Like, that's, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
You minimize side effects, right? Like, and I think that's exactly the same situation that business owners are dealing with right now. So yeah, I'm not going to sit here and say, here's what you should do, because your business is different than mine. But, and I suspect even yours, Shram, in a software company, like, it's different than mine. But you should be able to still isolate it, because in your business, you have the same three things. How many people am I getting in front of? How many of them are buying? And how much are they spending when they do?
Exactly. I mean, you just the way we're really looking to approach it right now is just to focus on like which e-commerce companies are actually gonna do okay and still keep growing, because then they're not so worried about the cash, sort of the financial position. Whereas the ones which are really hurting, it would be just incredibly insensitive to even reach out. That's just So I think, yeah, like, try to look at your own situation and then try to figure out like where exactly that, like which lever that you should really be focusing on. And I think that's where you can get even more, I'd say, creative. Like when you were talking about the conversion rate issue, I was even thinking that maybe another idea could be that if you identify that the cases that people are trying to be a little bit more careful with their purchases, you could probably take an AOV hit too, right? So maybe it's not just discounts, but maybe you also just prioritize products that aren't that are a little bit cheaper than you would in a normal time frame, because then you're sort of encouraging people to think like, okay, I can afford that.
That's exactly the right kind of thinking. And actually, if we had cheaper products, we would do it.
Yeah,
This
yeah,
is another sad thing. We were actually just in development for like an intro level $25 product that was just like a little fun. That's exactly right, though. Like, to just say like, here's a little taste of this. And even right now, well, baseball is stopped in America, and if you're a baseball fan, like, that stinks. Maybe it's a little way to just tell somebody you're thinking about them while you wait for baseball to come back. And I'm a huge baseball fan. For me, like, it sucks to go through large things without the sort of distraction and joy of something so fun to me as a sport I love. So,
yeah.
so like, there's maybe some messaging around that. So 4x400 is really connected to Common Thread Collective. Common Thread Collective is the majority owner, and Common Thread Collective is a digital marketing agency that works with e-commerce companies from $0 to $20 million.
Right.
So we see lots of ad accounts all the time, and I have the advantage of kind of getting to go back and forth and talk with what they're seeing over there.
Mhm.
We're in the same building, and not right now. Nobody's in the building right now, but normally we're in the same building.
Hopefully
So
not.
the CEO of that company and I are talking all the time, like, what are your clients seeing and what are ours? And that kind of idea of like, message the moment and like, think about your product mix is part of the thing that's winning for people right now. If you can like
Mm.
actually sort of help people to really see that, and to change how you're messaging people that makes sense in this moment, it can make a huge difference even without changing the product. So there's just like all kinds of little things like that to keep playing with constantly.
Yeah, I mean, in the end, it comes down to how empathetic you are, right? Like if you can actually put yourself in the shoes of the customer and how they might be feeling, and then try to. I mean, I guess it's not just pure empathy. You probably just need some data as well to try to understand exactly why they're not converting and things like that. That gives you a much better chance at actually speaking to their fears. Like I've seen a lot of e-commerce stores put up this little, red banner which says something like, "Hey, how does COVID affect your orders?" And I think that's great. Like it doesn't take too much work to do that. And it's probably the number one thing someone's thinking when they come on the site. Like, okay, if I spend money with you guys, are you going to get the delivery through or am I going to have problems? Just answer the question right up front, and then you're probably going to have a much better time with your conversions.
About that too is it's not even an offer or anything. It's just clarity of information and making the
Exactly.
process of purchase a little like more frictionless. Um, and yeah, same thing. Like I've thought about that with my checkout flow, just like the same thing, just making it clearer that right now we are still shipping at normal rates, essentially, which is true for FC goods. Like maybe that's all people need is just to know they're going to get it in time.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and that would actually be the issue. Like yeah, so to me, there's just like so many little things like that to be thinking about addressing where the person is at. And then it's really different. I mean, we have a Facebook ads training product
Mhm.
on the Common Thread Collective side, where right now we're taking a totally different approach there, which is like, let's grow this community. Let's offer lots of free advice to people who are struggling right now. And maybe
Right.
in the long run, some of those people will stick around as they realize, hey, we can actually be helpful to you when they all feel like they have more cash in their hands. So we just have offered entrance into our normally what's a paid community. We just offered entrance into it for free, grown a ton,
Wow.
like, you know,
Like, what kind of
you know,
questions are you getting over there? I'm
amounts.
curious. I'm sure it's like,
It's all
any themes
Yeah,
that you're spotting?
it's a mix, and it's all the usual stuff like how do I set up an ad account and what's the right way to
Right. Okay.
segment targeting and stuff like that. It's all the way through like what are you thinking creatively right now to how do you hunt down a problem to yeah, it's a whole range of stuff that's sort of more evergreen and in this moment. And we're just kind of seeing everybody do that. But people are clearly trying to take the moment and say like, I need to be the best that I possibly can be right now. So our
Yeah.
response to that is to approach that kind of educational platform really differently than we were a couple weeks ago because the moment has changed so much. Nobody's going to
Mm.
spend $500 a month on training products right now. Nobody has the money.
Yeah.
So we look at that and go like, can we kind of come around
Make it an
and make this
investment,
something
right?
that right and just let people realize, hey, we're sincerely here to be helpful and to serve you in this time. Um,
Yeah, and I
once
think
things change,
e-commerce
let's
is
come back
just
around.
exploding in terms of mindshare right now, right? If you think about it, like let's just say we go with that hypothesis that we don't know what's going to happen in the future. One thing we do know is that people still need things to survive, like essentials or whatever. And then if you are going to be in quarantine, the only thing that you can probably do is go online and make your purchases. So I think even people who've never sold anything online before are probably already thinking about already have or are already actively looking at upskilling to start a store.
There's probably people who are going to be new people in this. If you follow, do you know Webb Smith on? You follow him at all? 2
No,
p.m. Inc.
no,
Yeah,
no. Sounds
yeah.
like I should.
Webb and 2 p.m. His community. He's great. Yeah, at Webb on Twitter. Pretty good handle.
Yeah, but
He's been theorizing a lot about this. This is like in the even in the short run and especially in the long run, e-commerce still represents only like 14% of commerce in the US. Like it's still a relatively low percentage of the total buying and selling of consumer goods that's happening. And
yeah,
that basically this will just be a huge boom to that, which just make the pool bigger for everybody to swim in. So again, it's not hard for me to imagine that happening. As I said earlier, I'm not banking on anything like that. But one way or the other. But yeah, I definitely think that's a possible outcome here, and that continuing to be on the forefront of helping people as they set those businesses up on the software side of things, and then on the actual brand side of things, really making sure that we're building for the long term with stuff that really works great. But yeah, I think it could all really matter.
yeah. I mean, but what would you say to somebody who's in those shoes and sort of thinking about it? Because I know you work with like pretty successful brands now, but you've kind of got an arm where you kind of build them up, right? So let's say you've got like a brick and mortar store who and their sales are probably tanking. Hopefully not, but I think there's quite a few that are worried. And they're thinking of just getting online quickly. Would you say, well, hang on, it's very different. Don't think about it right now, or would you say, yes, absolutely, just go for it?
Oh man, that is so hard. I mean, the barrier to entry has never been lower, right? Like you can set up a Shopify store
Yes,
so
Shopify is
easy,
like
and
90-day trial right now.
man, and it's just so Shopify is so it's just an incredible piece of technology. I think it's the best piece of software I use. Like it's easy to overlook it as that because it's so gigantic that it doesn't even feel like software anymore. It just feels like a foundation that you build other software on top of,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it's just mind blowing how great it is. So yeah, so Shopify is incredible and definitely has lowered the barrier to entry. I think for anybody, I would I think what I would come back to is start with analysis. Before you go and try and do a big new thing, really know what problem you're trying to solve and how you're going to solve it. Like a lot of people like love the idea of setting up an online store, but have never once thought about how to actually get traffic to that store. And if you don't know how to get traffic there, if you don't have any plan for that, then don't even bother, because
Yes.
that's like setting up your retail store in the middle of the desert somewhere. Like it's just yeah, the world is really big. There's a lot of places where a storefront would get a lot of people in front of it, and a lot of places where it wouldn't, and that's the same thing on the internet. Like, yeah, so I think that's what I would say is like really know the problem you're trying to solve. If you think you can solve that problem, like like e-commerce is not rocket science, and I mean that like not as a shot. It's hard, like everything is, but it doesn't require deep technical expertise to
No,
get
that's true.
involved. So yeah, so I would say like, yeah, if you think it can solve a real problem for you, go for it.
But I think you really hit on a good point there, because I think, with platforms like Shopify, I agree. It's amazing. It's really democratized access to online selling. The technical hurdle is no longer there. You can just go right now, sign up, get a decent theme there, and get your products uploaded, and boom, you're selling. But I'd say the challenges, like you mentioned, are really like getting that traffic and making sure they convert, right? So if I guess if someone's listening, just like what Andrew was saying, if you don't have this plan, maybe a next best thing would be to reach out to somebody in your network who you trust, who can actually advise you on what you could do, instead of just going on it on your own, right? Where you don't have the skills, and like you're probably going to waste even more money when you're in a time when you really don't want to be doing that.
You think for like an entrepreneurial type versus otherwise, but I mean, I think one of the most helpful things that happened for me is I started on the brand side at a brand called Kalo. Makes silicone wedding rings, kind of the first big company that was doing that, if you've seen those. And so I was a media buyer there. I got trained in the ground up. Company was not funded, so it was just sort of like, okay, everybody learn what to do.
Okay.
And it's like a classic story like that as it was growing quickly. And I thought I knew so much from that experience, but what really actually taught me a ton was getting to work in an agency. And this is
Mm.
not an obvious option for a lot of people, but if you've got an opportunity to work on somebody else's business in a way that you think you can provide some expertise to, any situation in which you can do that, I think, especially if you're moving from storefront to online, um, those are the things that are really worth your time, I think, because what you can end up doing then is sort of honing your skills and get more reps by seeing a lot of stuff that's not just your little world. So just getting outside of your own little circle is really helpful in a lot of different ways, I think.
Yeah, and maybe this is like an opportunity, because the kind of work which you do for agencies are totally doable at home. And now that everybody's remote anyway, you probably have an even better, it doesn't really matter if the agency's in San Francisco and you're sitting in some, remote place. You could, as long as you've got a decent internet connection, you could probably contribute.
Especially now as much as ever. I don't know that anybody's really hiring right now, but in a few weeks, hopefully.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully, like even if you don't have, I mean, I don't know if you can afford to, and like offer your services for free just to learn, that could be something too, so that you can apply it on your own business. But I think just
I
generally
was
that's
just advising a friend that the other day. Just he was trying to go like, should I keep doing this or go over here? I said, dude, go consult for people, charge as little as possible, learn as much as possible, get some big clients, charge more when there's more money to be made. And he's a smart guy, he'll figure it out.
Yeah, I mean, if you apply the framework you mentioned with e-commerce to just the general market right now, whenever you have this kind of crisis, it just means that it's created a whole new set of problems. So I'd say the people who are going to be the most successful are the ones who are able to identify those problems faster and come up with something to do about it. And what better way to identify the problems than talking to people as much as you can, right?
True, man. Like, and this is where, like I said, I'm saying like, it's not technical expertise. The skill is problem solving. Like, if you're a great problem solver and you want to work on e-commerce companies, like I do not need you to have deep background in this area. I came from a completely different universe than any of this stuff, and was able to solve some problems, and that was how I was able to like make a career out of it. So yeah, it's just it. Yeah, it's not it's that's really the job number one, and that's why I'm so hot on this idea of like the issue is really analysis and isolating the problem and being able to solve that more than it is anything else. Because if you can do that over and over again, just keep finding the right next problem to solve and solving it, you can go really far.
I think Hans Rosling is going to be very proud of you.
Well, he's dead, so I'll have to talk to him about it later. But
yeah, I mean, I should have said would have been.
Yeah.
That was a shame. It's a really good way to be thinking about it. Like try to be as analytical as much as possible, because like the data doesn't lie, right? It can lie, but if you can train yourself to look at it in the right way, then I think there's a lot of wisdom you can get out of it.
Absolutely.
So hey, it's been a really, really good conversation, Andrew. I think you've spit out a lot of very, very good advice. I'm pretty sure people are really going to want to know how they can get in touch with you. Maybe even join that group that you mentioned. So
Yeah.
do you want to tell the listeners how they can get in touch?
Yeah, I think the easiest place is probably on Twitter. If you're not dialed in, especially if you're an e-commerce person, if you're not dialed into e-commerce Twitter, you got to get there. It's great. It's like a really cool community of people who are really trying to help each other out. I just put a new Shopify app on one of my sites like 2 days ago. That was just a Twitter recommendation because it's just really good. So I'm at Andrew J Faris, it's Faris, on Twitter. I think like if you sort of just follow me and reach out, I can connect you to the show you'll see pretty quickly like who all is active there. There's like brand owners and vendors and software people and everybody else. It's a really great setup. Even if you're not a Twitter person, usually like that's most of what I use Twitter for, and it's been cool. I host a podcast called the E-commerce Playbook. Just Google it, where we just do that 10 to 15 minutes max a week, and we talk and sometimes gruesome terms about what is going wrong in our business, and just sort of put it out there.
I'm sure
in fact, that happened because a friend of mine said, hey, like, I want you to bleed on camera. That's the goal of this. And I was like,
what?
Oh, thanks for volunteering me for that. So we're talking. I mean, this is my last one we did. I think it'll come out soon. I don't know when this will be published, but yeah, anyway, it should be out by now whenever this gets published. It's just about how the struggle is real for coronavirus for us, and we're getting crushed in some ways. And so that's that. So that's e-commerce playbook. And then, actually, if you're interested in that Facebook ads educational product, I really recommend it. It's actually not just a product, it's a community. Like, so it's community based. There's webinars constantly and some of that stuff with like the experts over at Common Thread Collective who have, just spent millions of dollars of other people's money on Facebook ads. And I just highly recommend their expertise. I can tell you just from knowing them well, they're like high quality humans who are not guru-y trying to, like, they're just great. So go check that out. It's the best Facebook training product I know of. That's youradmission.co. youradmission.co, or hit me up on Twitter and I'll point you to the relevant folks there.
And is admission spelled with a capital A and D?
Yeah. It's capital A, lowercase d, capital M. Yeah. You got the marketer speak dialed in, huh? So yeah, I mean, I think the other thing is if you have a small e-commerce business, less than $1 million in revenue, you feel like you're struggling, you don't know what to do, like 4x400 might be a good resource for you to talk about that. That's where we start with all of our brands, is less than $1 million, sometimes even pre-revenue if it's the right fit. And we'll bring you in to partner with you and try to help you grow that thing with a really hands-on approach. So you can, I think, just find me on Twitter at Andrew J Faris if you want to talk about that. I'm game.
Awesome. Andrew, it was really great talking to you. No, I think that was I mean, people need to get in touch. So all right.
So good, man. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it.
No, it was a great conversation. I loved it.
Good.
You're still here, which means you definitely enjoyed that conversation. This is a special COVID-19 e-commerce mini-series to help small business merchants out there get prepared. We're doing a lot more of these, so be the first to know whenever there's a new episode. Just follow DataCue, that's DATACUE, on Twitter, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Stay safe out there, everybody. Till next time, this is Sharam.